Okay. All right. Can you hear me now? Yeah?
Yep.
Sweet. Woo! All right. Thank God I caught that early. That would have been weird. Yeah. Everyone just, we should have like, we don't have a code word, but we should have like a code signal or something. Um, awesome. That's it, Abner. Like, hands up, Joe, we can't hear you. Little pick right on a card or something. Anyway, anywho, we're doing React Router, and it's pretty exciting. I like React Router. It's going to allow us to route. So if you are used to or have worked with any sort of REST APIs and building or accessing routes, even setting them up on the server side, this will be familiar in regards to what we're trying to accomplish and how we can hit different resources based on a route. For the agenda, attendance, office hours. It doesn't seem like a lot of people are signing up for office hours, so I'm just going to stress that it is a resource that me and Abner are me and Abdul. Abner's not providing them. Abdul's providing them. Me and Abdul are providing them just to help clarify, answer any questions. I have met with a few, and you can reach out to them. They're on the sheet and see how useful the time is. But I think it's quite useful. We can go through the homework. We can go through any of the additional ones if you happen to be working on the traffic light or city picks. I just posted a new one called Memory Game, which has cards that you flip over. We took a look at the API for deck of cards, so you can always incorporate that. It's just a conversion of one thing, JavaScript thing, into a React. So it works. You just have to figure out how to convert it. Same thing with the others. Yeah, I stress the importance of the office hours. We also have mid-course surveys today. So we need to spend a few moments. I'm going to go over a deck for the mid-course surveys. I'm going to confirm you all got an email, and then we're going to spend about 10 minutes, 15 minutes on the mid-course surveys, and then we'll jump into homework review. We'll review the homework, not twice, but only once. Homework review. Intro to router. Then we'll jump into React Router and see what it's like. What do we need to set up React Router? How do we install it? How do we import those components? And then we'll just kind of wrap up with exit tickets once again. Cool. So let me go into the deck. Let's see here. Am I not seeing? I'm not sure there should be sound. No, we can't hear any. Can you still not hear anything? Can everyone hear me?
I can.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Maybe that was 804 because sound works for most of us. Okay. Yeah. Rafat just slacked. I don't know, Rafat. I think a few people can hear me, so maybe that's on your side. If you can't hear me, just Slack in the Slack channel, so at least we're aware. Maybe there's some weird stuff going on. I'm not sure. Okay, so mid-course surveys. Let me just kind of go through what the mid-course surveys are. There's two surveys. There's a mid-course, and we are at mid-course. We're at, if you can believe it, week 5, right? So we're halfway through the course. And then we have one at the end, of course, right? And so we want all your feedback. As you know, I already look at kind of religiously the exit ticket feedback. So I'm always happy when I get it, always a little sad when people don't leave it, but it's always appreciated, and it helps me present or prepare or work out the glows and grows so I can give a better class the next time. Now, in the survey, in this particular survey, the first question is for a net promoter score, and it calculates an NPS. And when you're answering this question, I want you to consider how likely are you to recommend GA to a friend or colleague? And what that means is not like, hey, your mom's like, hey, I want to learn programming. So, and you're like, oh, you should not take this course, right? Of course, somebody like that who doesn't have the skills shouldn't be taking this course, right? But if you had a colleague that was also needed to know React for the position, right? They're going to jump into the position. They need to get up to speed with React. Would you recommend it to them? Would you recommend it to anyone else who you know in the world of development that's like, oh yeah, I'd like to get an understanding of React? That is our target audience when we're asking this question. And then, just ask yourself things like, how have you enjoyed the class? Have you gotten a lot out of the hands-on, which I really try to stress? I know some might be more want the theory behind stuff. I've taught a lot of classes. See Joey smile because we were talking about that. You might want the theory behind what's happening, and I get it. You know that our time is short, and every time I want to do more, I can't even do more. So for me to stop and be like, hey, this is why we're doing it, I feel like we'll just lose time. And there's so much material out there that you can read the backstory that I think it's just important to get you doing the thing. And this is the time to practice it and work on it. So I really try to emphasize more hands-on approach versus going through a slide deck and going through a README and going step by step. That's definitely not my approach to teaching. Okay, there we go. See Joey's book, Learning React. Yes, yes. So when the question's asked, that's really where we're going, and take into consideration the office hours, the extra materials, all that stuff. Do you think that would also benefit? Okay. I've taken a lot of classes myself. I'm sure you have all too. And a lot of the classes I've taken haven't given me the additional material or the hands-on. And I'm bringing this into this class because I come from the day class where it's all hands-on. Teaching theory is like, throw that out the door, build the thing, because that's what's going to get you the job. And so I really focus on doing that. So that's the first question. Now, it's going to go from like 0 to 10. Hopefully there's no zeros. 9 or 10 makes you a promoter, like you would promote it. So if you had your friend, you would promote it. 7 or 8 are just passives. You're kind of on the fence. I don't know if I would or not. And then anything below that is a detractor saying like, I wouldn't promote this class. Whatever score you do give, I'd love to hear the additional feedback. Like, I'm all about feedback. You're never going to hurt my feelings by telling me what you thought went well, what I should work on. Once again, I've read it already. I know sometimes we go fast and I can't cover the material. I kind of just spew it out and that's that. But I do it because I want to get you as much as I can. Just a reminder, if any category you're not like a 5 or a 5 or a 10 out of 5, just write some comments. Like anything shows me or gives me an indication. The survey, then they will ask you about, obviously, the instructors, about me, the course content, the community, and any obvious additional comments you might have. And then the survey is shared with the instructional team. My manager looks at it, her manager looks at it, everyone chats about it, and we compare this React class with the previous React classes and see how we can up those NPS scores and read the feedback and make those changes. And then once again, I look at all the feedback. So you already know I'm looking at it. And yeah, so I think it's just, does anyone have any questions, curious about? Okay. If you're not curious, then you should have received an email already from GA with a link to the survey. So tell me if you have or have not. So I'm going to just put in here. I have here. This is just fill out the survey. I'm just going to slack this out to us here. Here's the survey. Now I just want to say click here if you have received the email. Okay? Just let me know if you've received it. If you haven't, it could have gone into your spam. So what I just slacked out here is it could have gone into your spam folder. The sender's going to be feedback at General Assembly, so you can take a look at your spam. I cannot resend the email. You would have to email online at General Assembly. And and then they can resend it, but I personally cannot resend it. Okay. And give about 5-10 minutes. So it looks like 7. Cool. If you did not receive it, you can Slack me directly. Slack me, maybe include Abdul as well, so we're both on the same page, and we can take it from there. So awesome. I'm going to give you about 10 minutes right now, 10, 15 minutes. It says about 10, 15 minutes, 5, 10 minutes, 10 minutes, yeah. So I'll say click here when you're done with, when you have submitted the survey, okay? Check mark. Okay, so I'm gonna let you do it. I only have 9 clicks. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So there's 12 of us and only 9 clicks that you've received it. So I'm gonna assume maybe a few of you haven't. Okay. Sweet. Okay. All right. Stephen, I'm going to see if I can reach out to anyone to see if I can ask them to resend it, but I don't know at this time if I can catch anybody, but I'm going to see. Might be able to. And I guess is that the only person? I only heard from one. Okay. So let me see. And Joey, okay. So our 2 friends from Australia have not received it. Okay. So it's quite the coincidence. So let me see if I can get somebody to resend it. Okay. So for Joey and Stephen, I reach out. Hopefully they'll get back to me, but I don't know if they're online at this time.
Hey Joe.
Yeah.
So the part about like General Assembly campus, which doesn't really apply to us.
Yeah. I'm going to say, yeah, what could we give that? Because it's usually the facilities on site. So yeah, I don't know if there's a not applicable setting or.
I'll just give all that's fine.
Yeah, I mean, in all honesty, how do you honestly give like the settings? Maybe the facilities as in like the Zoom the Zoom recordings, the remote platform. That's really all we have to work with at this point in time. So maybe you comment on that.
Mhm.
Okay. Stephen and Joey, Mike, the person in charge of it said he's going to try to resend it. We'll see. I'm going to resend it over. I asked him if he's sending it now. So we'll see. See undersea cables and sharks. What's going on in Australia? I always wanted to go out there and surf, but you get some badass sharks out there. Don't want to get bitten by a badass shark. Kangaroos, Gustavo. Don't want to get kicked by one of those, right? Yeah, Jesus. Sounds like a scary place to be. I thought Manhattan was dangerous. Seems like you got to watch out for Australia. Drop bears. Do you have scorpions too? Is there scorpions out there? I think Teza, right? Oh, yeah. Yeah, Megan, I was wondering the same thing. What's a drop bear? Is that like a brand new species of bear I never heard of? All right. Okay. I see 4 have clicked on the completion. So just putting it right here. I only see 4, so I'm going to give it a few more minutes, okay? Stephen, Joey, did you get it yet? You get the email? I don't know if they sent it. Okay. Eight, 9. Okay. Okay. So we got 6. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. They're going to follow up with both of you. Something about being pre-enrolled. So, so they'll follow up with you and they'll be sending, I suppose, the link out tomorrow or something. Okay. Awesome. And 7. Okay. I think 10, Maybe 2 more minutes and we'll jump in. 2 more minutes. Because nothing makes them happier than getting everyone to fill out the tickets. Usually when someone doesn't fill it out, then we'll ask everyone again. If you haven't filled it out, and we'll keep asking. Okay. All right. I think I'm good, right? All good? Just give me a thumbs up. We're good? Good, good, good. You filled it out? Filled it out. Good? Awesome. Okay. Sweet. All right. Got our 8. So we'll have to work with that. Homework review. Just go over this. I don't want to spend too much time. There wasn't a lot to get done with this particular homework. There was just a few things. I introduced just 1 or 2 new things in order to do it. One was the env file, and then the other was just making this other API call. And so that's what we wanted to do. Right? We wanted to be able to click on each one of these and like make another API call. We still have the ability to favorite. Click on favorites. We can see them. We can unfavorite. Click on Joker. See them all. All that functionality is intact. So the one thing that we were asked to do, kind of like right from the start, and that's what I had walked us through earlier, towards the end of class, was the env file. And so the env file is used to load environmental variables. And we also, when we do put our environmental variables in there, we also put things like our keys, any API keys that we're using, or passwords, like secret passwords to some sort of hashing algorithm. Things that we don't want to make it onto the web. We don't want to push these things up. We don't want it in some GitHub repo where now people know what the secret password is that hashed, that they can crack all the passwords, right? Where they know the API key that I signed up for, and now they're using it and they never had to sign up for, and somehow I get blocked from using it again, right? So we don't really want it to go up. On our particular instance with our code sandbox, we could turn our code sandboxes into private code sandboxes so no one could see them anyway. So the env file in this instance isn't as needed, but if it was local and we were pushing things up, we'd want to exclude that, right? And so we created this .env. It's a hidden file, which means if you just go to the terminal, do an ls in Mac, you won't see it there. But if you do an ls-a, you would see all hidden folders and files. We install .env. This is an npm package. And that npm package will ultimately be looking for an env file with possibly a .local extension, but it didn't work in the code sandbox. And I posted something in our Slack channel about that it should have worked, but it didn't work, and it is just unique to the code sandbox. But there is a sequence of files and paths that it looks for. So we did that. We then went to the tmdb file here, where originally we were pulling our data, right? This is where all our data is being pulled from. And we updated the key, which was just like put your API key here. And we replaced it with process.env. And then we gave it the name of kind of that variable name that we defined in the env file. And then here we import that package so we could use it, and we just run the config. Importing it, running .config then executes and says, oh, go to .env and load everything into the process env environment and append the new key, and then we can always query that key and get the value. And that's really it. Like doing that would have set us up. And then it was just a matter of going into film details, right? It was in film details that we had to, this was completely empty, really. It just had a little bit of text to start off with originally. And in film details, we would put a click event on, I'm going to go to film row because that's where the click event would happen, right? Hold on. App is passing down to film details. It's just passing this, right? So film details is just getting the current, but the on click here handles details click. That's being run in app. So if we were to click on this, it would execute in here, right? It executes in the scope of the app. So it's in the app. So if I look for on details click right here, we would see clicking on this executes this. And here we're making our call to the API. We're passing all the way down from row. We're passing up this ID, the film, we're passing up the whole film, and we're grabbing the film ID, and we're grabbing our API key right here. And then we're just appending this. This was part of the construct to make the call. This is just additional information. And then we fetch. We fetch the URL, right? And this is the URL. We make a fetch call. We parse it from string data to an object or some JavaScript object that we can work with, and then we pass that along, and then we set state to the current data. So this returns back one thing, one object, because that's what I'm setting in state. And since current is set to data, and in state, up here, current is an object, we must be getting just an object back. The minute we update states, that triggers a re-render. This now has something, and that's the something we pass down to film details. Okay? We updated, now this thing has something, and we pass that thing down to film details. And here's film details. Now the issue with film...
Question.
Sure.
So back in app, sorry, before you move on, I just wanted to check in. I know we named the URL as const. Was there a reason that we did that instead of just putting it in the object for fetch, or? Oh
yeah, only because we had to add a few things in here and just make a few changes, and it's a really long line of code. So instead of taking this whole thing here and just kind of sticking it in fetch and making fetch this really long thing, this is just a terse way of looking at it. Like if I had to manipulate the URL and concatenate things, I would do that beforehand and then call the variable that stores it. That's the only reason why. It's just for the visual appeal of it, the visual effect to see like, this is where I make the fetch call, and this is where I do any factoring and concatenation and evaluation to the URL. That's really the only reason why we would do that, okay? There's no other reason. Cool? Okay, so in details, back to details, we went to details, and in details, if we got something, right, we would pass it into here. We're just grabbing it and like getting the backdrop and the poster URL. Okay, and that should be in the film, right? Props.film would have a backdrop path and a poster path. Okay. And then here, I'm just going to move this down. We create this kind of freestanding variable, like, hey, let details. Now, let details is going to be something after we run this evaluation. So I have this if. If we actually have an ID, if an ID came down, if we have this, then details is now equal to all of this HTML. Just make it all the HTML, or details is equal to this information, which would just be that is just this icon, right? Because that's coming from the Google Fonts icons, right, or material icons. But if we do have it, we would see all of this data, right? And then we just call detail right there, okay? I did notice that maybe one or two of you did it just slightly different, that you might have put all of this into a function and then just called the function. That's another way of doing it. There's multiple ways to do this, right? Nothing is kind of hard and fast that you have to use an if statement. Maybe we could have used a ternary operator, right? Could have possibly done that. But this suffices. You know, once again, lots of different ways to do it. We could have repackaged this as a function and then just called the function here and ran the logic inside of the function. Doesn't really make a difference right now. I personally like functions because functions are things that I can call when I need them. And if it's code that I can like take out and maybe reuse, that's awesome. And functions are testable, right? I mean, this code runs immediately when the function loads, and I can't really stop it from running unless I comment it all out. But a function, I just don't call the function and the code doesn't run. So it makes it easier to test the rest of your code sometimes if the issue is coming from the function, okay? Or it's coming from this code, all right?
Joe?
Yep.
So in this case, you have detail equals and then open parentheses and then JSX here. Is this just a cool thing about React where it will just treat JSXs that way? Because I tried to put tick marks and then I got text the first time I did this.
Oh, so you're saying if you put a tick mark here?
Yeah, you put a tick mark there, no parentheses, and you put a tick mark on the bottom, you get all of that as text in your display.
Yeah, it's seeing it as straight up text. It's not parsing it into code because at that point in time, JavaScript, remember the backticks are more for something like this. If I had a variable like let hello is equal to, hello, right? That's a variable. Now I can create something like a backtick and like, I'm going to say hello, right? It treats all the text as just text, and then this as the variable that it's enumerating to do some sort of concatenation. So I believe when you do the backticks here without this, it's just treating it as one big piece of text. Although I almost think it should work. I'd have to test it out, Gustavo, to see. But I mean, I'm going to take your word that it doesn't work, because if I was to, we're saying if I got rid of this and I got rid of that and I just put these backticks here, that we'd have issues right now, right? Now it looks green, it obviously looks different, and if I do this, now we're just seeing text, straight up text, right? It's not treating it as something that it can parse into HTML. That's really what's happening there, okay?
I guess what confuses me is that when I assign a variable like this without the parentheses, it would, if I did this in just plain old JavaScript, I think I'd get an error. Is there something special about React that because it's JSX, I don't get the error?
Yeah. I think if we did this, let me see if I put it up here. I want to see if second error out. That works. I'm storing, I think this is a JSX thing, but this HTML here has a beginning and an ending, and it's almost like encapsulating itself. As long as it starts on this line, I actually think you pointed this out early on. You did point it out in one of the beginning classes that if you start it on the line, then you don't need the parens or something like that. I remember you had mentioned it. The fact that we're going to the next line here, let me see. No, we don't even need it. Look at that. The parens isn't even needed.
It is for return, if I remember right.
It is for return. Here it's not, so this works perfectly fine. Once again, I can't really explain why we're using them here and not just having it. It's also, in the world of like JSX and React, you're going to see, because that return always has the parens, we're kind of simulating that return, right? We're kind of like, hey, we want to return, and this is how we would have done it if we were using the return keyword. So we're just kind of emulating that. That's what I think we're doing here, since we don't need it. Like, I didn't come up with the lab. Like, I didn't create the lab. That was provided by GA. So I'd have to talk to the person that created it to be like, hey, why did you put that there? If we can do it without using it, should we do it without using it? Once again, it kind of shows where something begins and something ends. Maybe it's a visual indication to someone that that's where it began and that's where it ended. But it obviously works without it. And so we could play that game and just not include it. I kind of like it with it because I get used to using it with the return. So I personally would probably have included it. That's just my preference. After a while of you just doing the same thing over and over again, you start doing it whether it's efficient or not. You're just like, that's what I'm used to doing, right? It's hard to break that habit. What other questions? Anything else found puzzling? I did also.
So, I
Yeah,
had a question.
sure.
Can in an error catch, can you reset state?
In the error catch
So
here.
when you've done the fetch.
Oh, when we're
something like
here in fetch.
yeah, and then let's say your URL is small form or something like that.
Yeah, so you could say catch error, and then you could have in here done this dot set state.
That wasn't working for me.
Oh, so this, you couldn't set state here if you didn't hit it?
So I had a componented mount, and in componented mount, I was pulling in a new list of movies.
Okay.
But the existing list already existed in data. So I was saying if the fetch fails, then fall back to the existing data. But
Okay.
it just kept erroring out.
Okay. I mean, I can take a look at yours. I'll take a look at it after class, and then I'll try to work through it.
Usually you can set state in an error catch, yeah?
Yeah, you can. I mean, the error catch is meant for you to do whatever you need to do.
Yeah.
You know, so you have access to state. You have access to anything that you would have had access to in this successful then, you would have access to here. I mean, in here you have access to the error. That's what the catch is for. The catch is for, like, if an error is triggered, it's only handed to the catch, right? If the data works, it's only handed to the then. Catch never would get the data. Like, they're separate things. So you should be able to do it. I can take a look at your code and see if I can figure something out, okay?
Yeah, cool.
Sweet. All right. The only other thing I think for this that I updated, and it wasn't required to do the updating for it, but again, I always just kind of like having that architecture. I did add or update the last and final version of it, where here I just took handle details, right? It's being passed from app. I just color coded them to show you what's being passed down that is the same thing. So handle details click is being passed down here, and then it gets it as on details click. It's passing back up here. This passes it down here to film row, and then it gets executed right here, right? Does it? Oh no, it just gets executed here. It doesn't go to Fave. Fave was the other lab. Okay, so it's film row that executes it, and then it gets triggered here, but executed in the app. The app is where that function is running. So this just shows you where it's going down to. I can only tell you that how important this is right now. I'm helping my day class, and they're working on their capstone project, and it involves a React front end and a back end of either Node, Express, or Rails, whichever one they chose. And they're coming to me with all sorts of stuff. And the React app is growing and growing like a monster, where methods are just being passed down. And they're like, hey, why is it not working? And I'm like, well, what's being passed down what? And it takes me like 5-10 minutes just to understand what they're doing. If they had this, and I asked them to do this, and they gave me a rough draft the first time, but they haven't been doing this. And so I'm finding it hard to just jump in and say, oh yeah, this thing is being passed down. Have we taken a look at this? Because I don't know what I'm looking at. All I know is they know what's being passed down, but I have no idea what's being passed down and what's being triggered where. I have to look through everything to figure that out. Okay? So this is important. Think about that when it comes to your final project, which we'll be talking about on Thursday. I'm going to walk you through some of the final project stuff. Okay. So let's jump into React Router. Okay. So we're going to be doing React Router. I'm going to show you a few demos of what we're going to be doing with, oh no, what happened? Surge. That's odd. I just pushed this thing up just a moment ago. This was working. Let me just see, run build. I'm just going to run the build again and push it back up. Give me 1 second. Let me see. That one didn't work, but this one works. Here's a dentist site. This one should work. Surge. Okay. I think it's just taking time to spin it up. iStocks. Okay. Here we go. And let me just do this. iStocks React. Boom. All right. Pushing it up. Let me see if this is working now. There we go. All right. And what we're going to be doing is creating an app that has a few navigation items, and we are going to navigate around. If I click on these particular navigation elements, I can change what's here. What you don't see, and the reason why React routing or client-side routing is important, is because we don't see the page refresh. Okay, the navigation stays consistent. It never refreshes at all. And this is the benefit of client-side routing versus server-side routing. If we were doing server-side routing, then the server needs to get the data, concatenate that data or loop through that data, put it into HTML, create the required HTML elements, kind of like React does, maps over something, spits out an LI, and then sends you the whole file. When you get the whole file, your browser has to reload to see all that data. Every time you make a request to the backend, it concatenates the information, creates a new HTML file that includes things like the navigation, the body, the footer, all of that, and resends it and it refreshes. And that doesn't really create a very smooth experience, right? Users now don't want to see the page refresh. It's a bad UX experience. We just want to see as many things stay consistent and only the things change that need to change. And that's where React routing comes in. That's its strong point, is that it allows us to only change this content in here and not touch this nav. By going to stocks, I only see this. If I go to one stock, I can filter it. What you'll see is that the URL is changing. So here's the URL. If I go to stocks, it changes to stocks. If I go to about, it changes to about. If I go back to stocks and then click on a stock, it's stocks and then the name of the stock. The URL, the changing of the URL triggers the request for a resource, okay? And React is going to be handling that trigger mechanism. So it's going to be fielding it, it's going to be searching this, and it's going to be like, oh, I will make the request under the hood to the server to get that information, okay? That's what's happening. I don't know what's happening with, let me see. Is this? Yeah. Here's another one too, right? Procedures, contact. This one's just a bit more basic. This is the kind of stuff that we're going to be creating today and walking through and seeing how to do this, right? This is actually your lab. I'm just kind of giving you a preface to the lab, okay? So our objectives are going to be to install React Router DOM. That is a third-party library. React Router wasn't made by the React people. It's another group of people made it, but it's taken off. It is the go-to React routing platform to use. So we'll install it, we'll install and import it, and then we'll import specific React Router components. Okay, just like, you know how we've been using app and form and things that we've created? Those are names that we've decided to give those components. When we install this third-party tool, React Router DOM, it brings with it a whole series of its own components. We don't have a choice but using the naming convention, for the most part, of what they've called those components. And so we'll have something called router, we'll have something called routes, and something called link, and we'll import those directly from React Router DOM, and then we'll go on and set up our routes, okay? That's what we're looking to do, okay? So I'm going to go to what we're going to be building. This is what we're going to be building as part of the hands-on demo. Here we go. I have some Tornado's website. It's really just a baseball team, I think. I'm not even really sure. Here's a home page. I go to roster, and I see a bunch of players. I go to schedule, and I see the schedule. I'm going to go back to roster. Now, what I want you to see is the URL. See how this is a specific route, right? This is the default routes. You're going to, where there's a way to define the default route. If I go to roster, look, I have / roster. If I go to one of these /, it takes me to a number, / a number, instead of, where's the other one? Instead of the name of the stock, right? This one is stocks, and this one is roster and the number. I can even go back home, look back, or I can go home. So I can manipulate or move around the paths that I've gone through, just like you've done on any website. You know how you click on back. Look, if I go back, I'm going through the browser history. So React is keeping track of the history of the sites, the URLs, and it's taking us back. Okay, and that's what we're leveraging, the ability to do just that. Okay, so this is kind of what we're going to be building up. I'll slack out the starter code. Okay. So I try to get it started a little bit here. Okay. I'm going to open that up in another window so I can always kind of go back and forth and test this out. Okay. That's our app. Should open up, fork it so you have your own copy of it. Keep mine open up in one tab and your forked version in another tab so you can just kind of go back and forth between if you get lost, if something doesn't work. Now, even for this, I have a React architecture that I'm looking to implement, right? So this will give us focus on what we're trying to do. There's some new things in here that you haven't seen, right? We haven't seen like this little dotted box around app, right? That's kind of new. This little switch here, oh, that's kind of new, right? They don't look like real things, but they look like they're doing something. And then I have here what looks like specific routes that are kind of going to render specific components. And this is what we're looking to build out, okay? So let's see if we can start building this out, okay? So let me go here. I'm just going to open up. I did have some lecture notes. Once again, I'm not big into like going meticulously through the lecture notes, but I just wanted you to see when it comes to routes, right? Routes are going to take you and have different paths, and each path is an access to a resource on the server. That's really what it is. Whether we're doing client-side routing, or maybe the client is just filtering out and making the calls, or server-side routing, where I'm going to the server and I'm actually getting the data, okay? But it's the same thing. Like this could look identical to this. There's almost no difference between these two paths. But what I want you to see is where it resolves to. See where this resolves to? Index, about. See how the pages are different? About HTML, post index, post one. The resolution is different. But look here, on client-side routing, it all resolves to the same file, meaning that there's no need to refresh the browser. Absolutely no need, okay? And that's the strength of all this. We don't need to refresh the browser when we're doing this, okay? And so we first need to import router. So let's just jump into importing the router. So I'm gonna add a dependency. Here's our dependency. And I want to add React router DOM. Now, we have to add two dependencies, okay? So there's two things that we are truly going to need to import. And we need to import React router. So I'm going to do this, hey, React router. Right. And then I'm going to go back and import React router DOM, okay? Two dependencies that we need in order for this to work, okay? We know that React itself is the library that we use to import React, but when we're doing React router, we need two separate libraries, okay? One is going to be responsible for the router, and the other one is going to be responsible for, I think, let me see, I forgot the React router DOM. React DOM. Oh, yeah, React Router DOM is where we're going to get our components. Okay. And then we just need the React Router as well, React DOM, because we need to import that. So let's take a look and see about importing it. Now that we've done this, I have the two libraries, React Router DOM, have both been imported. And we need to import those. So what I want to do, if I take a look at my architecture, I see that app has it kind of wrapped around it. Okay, so app is wrapped around. And the one thing that we don't see here is if I was to like, let me just take one of these, copy, paste. The one thing we don't see is that up here, there is index, right? There's an index component also that's rendering app, okay? So I'm gonna go to the index, and this is where we're at, and I'm gonna import, so I'm gonna import, let's see, right here. Oh, you know what? Yeah, here we go. I'm gonna import, and we're gonna do the curly braces because we're doing object destructuring. We're importing specific components. Now the router component, the top level router component is really called browser router. That's what it's really called. So if I say browser router from React Router DOM, okay? This browser router is a really long word, and we don't really want to use browser router. It's not something that we want to use. And what you're going to see is we're going to import browser router as router. It's just this shorter way of referencing the router, the browser router utility, okay, or the component. Now that I've imported the browser router, I have access to this router component. I have app here, and I'm rendering app. So I'm going to go here. I'm just going to put this on different lines here. So, and wrap this in the router component. So I'm going to take this, and I'm going to wrap router around it. Okay, I'm going to move this over. Keeps doing this. Okay, move the comma up here. Move the root element there. Okay. So what I've done now is taken the router component and wrapped it around app. And by doing this, app now has access to specific routing information, okay? React Router is now watching app and all its child components for any sort of routing triggers. If it gets any routing triggers, it will trigger and allow React Router to manage those triggering mechanisms, okay? So the first step, always, is to install the libraries and then import browser router as router. That's what I do. You don't have to import it as router. We could have went down here and just called it browser router, but I'm importing it as router from React Router DOM, and then I'm putting it here, okay? Awesome. So let's go to components. Let's go to app here. And now we want to start adding some routes. Like nothing's changed. I mean, if I click on these things, these are just anchor tags, and they're really going nowhere. These are just anchor tags inside of LIs, and they're not really going anywhere particular. So we want to do something with those, right? We want to put those someplace. They're in a nav element, and so I have the image here, and then I have home, and then roster and schedule, okay? Home, roster, and schedule. And now we want to implement some sort of route. Okay. When we do the routes, we have to render. See how this is just rendering home, roster, and these are just the links. They're not even our routes at this point on. These are just clicks here. But we need now to include some routes. Okay. So I'm going to create a little section here. I'll call it main. Okay, so I have a main section, nav. Okay, so this is all nav. So I have to put this inside of a div because you can't render multiple child elements, right? Okay, so I'm just going to move this over. Boop, boop. Okay. Remember, JSX only allows one top level, but as many child elements as you want, but only one top level element. Okay. And so if I want to add a section here, right, because I don't have a place here to even show my stuff, right? There's no place. I only have links, but where is the routing going to happen? So I don't really have anything to route at this point in time. So if I was to create a main component, I'm going to add a route. So if I do this, now watch what happens. If I go route and I say path is equal to, okay, and I'm just going to say component is equal to, I don't know, home. We're going to get all these errors, okay? Now the first error I'm going to get here, and this is what I want you to see, is route is not defined. Okay, now remember in index, I had to import this. If I didn't import this, if I go back here, if I comment this out, we'll also have an error that router is not defined. So it's important to import them because if you don't import them, you're going to get this error when it tries to use them. Okay, so now I'm back to route. Okay, so now I'm an app. All right, so if I want to use this, I have to go up here and say import, right, route from React router DOM. Okay. Now I'm getting another error that's saying home is not defined, right? Because I haven't created a home component yet. Okay. So if I go back to our clickable model here, let's see, where's our little clickable? I do have a home link, and if I click on home, I should see this content, right? I should be able to see all that content. Okay. So if I go back here, I need to create a home component in order to see this, in order to render this. So I'm just going to go to my components, create a new file, and I'll say home. Okay. In home, we will import React. All right. This is just going to be a dumb component from React, right? Okay. Then we will do a function home, and we will return, I don't know, let's see. Let me just see what this looks like here. Welcome to Tornado's website, right? There we go. I'll just put, I don't know, an H1. It says, welcome to the Tornado's website. You can call it whatever you want. And then I'm going to export default home. Okay. So now I have a component. I can use it. If I go back to app, all I have to do is import home from home, right? Boom. And it's working, and I see my content, right? So I have this router, and this route, that is my default route here, right? This path, that's the default route, okay? So if I was to add a comment here, that is the default route, okay? You go to your website, you don't put any forward slashes, that's where we're gonna go, okay? Well, what if I wanted to go to, say, the schedule, right? The schedule here just has a little bit of information like, I don't know, here's the schedule. It doesn't really make a difference, it's just hard-coded data. I don't think this is being pulled from anywhere. So I'm gonna go back here, and let's just create a schedule component, right? What I'm gonna do, just for the sake of simplicity, is I'm gonna copy, can I duplicate this? No, it's not gonna allow me to duplicate it, okay. So I'm gonna create a new file called schedule.js, right? For ease of purpose, I'm just gonna kind of copy everything from home, put it into schedule, and then here I can just change schedule. So I'm hoping the command key down. So when I highlight home, if I hold the command key down and press D, it will highlight the other elements that have home, and then I can change it all in one shot. Look, it's gone, and I do schedule, okay? And so I can just say, you know, schedule page, okay? Doesn't really matter what we put here. This isn't as important. If I go back to app, I just need to import it, right? Import home from here. So I just copy that, paste, and just do, let me see if I can do this. Boop, boop. Schedule. Boom. Okay. Awesome. So now I have a second component to use, but you can see here, little underscore, like it's not being called anywhere. So I'm going to say, hey, you know what? Well, how about this? If you go to a route where the path is schedule, then I'd like you to render a component called schedule.
Looks like a misspelling in component.
Oh, yes. Component. Right? All right. Now, what's the issue here? Can anyone just like right from the bat see what's happening?
You'd have to define all routes on the site.
Well, we have a couple of more routes to work through. But do you see both of those routes being rendered on the page?
Yeah, even though it's the route path.
Yeah, so what React is doing is it's saying, hey, you know what? Hey, this route of path / well, that matches. But you know what? Route path / and schedule also, I'm going to execute that as well. Okay, so if I go back here, I just refresh. If I go to schedule, it shows it. If I go to home, it does not show it. Okay, so the key point here is home has a / and that matches, and that's where it ends. There's nothing else to evaluate. But schedule has a / and that matches one route. It also sees schedule, so it also matches the schedule. Okay, this kind of works like does anyone work with, and a lot of people don't use it, like a switch. Doing an if-else statement in JavaScript is one way to do conditional logic, but does anyone work with like switches and cases? Okay, so a switch is meant to match one condition or multiple things and render something that matches multiple conditions. Okay, that's what a switch does. That's kind of what's happening here, right? It's like, it's acting like a switch, like, oh, I see this matches and this matches, so I'm going to show both of those things. Okay, and we don't want that. Now, roster has nothing, so if I go to roster, it's just going to refresh the page and take me home, right? It's actually still on roster here, but there's no roster, right? So there's nothing to match. But if I go to schedule, it does match. Okay. We can fix all this by using a keyword here called exact. So if I put this little keyword exact here, okay, I go back to the route and I was like, all right, home, schedule, home. But now I'm seeing like schedule page is still doing it. So I'm going to go back here and say, all right, exact schedule. All right, let's see again, home. Yeah.
You spelled exact wrong.
Spelled exact in the.
Oh yeah, that's exact. Okay. So I'm gonna go here. I wonder where it wouldn't have given me an error. So home and schedule, right? So just to confirm that it wasn't the misspelling that's allowing us to do this, I'm gonna get rid of the keyword exact. I'll go back here, home, schedule, home, schedule. What we're telling React is render this path only if it exactly matches. Don't render it if it doesn't match. Exactly. It just has to be a /. It can't be anything with schedule or roster or anything. It can only be a /, and that's what we're doing. Okay?
And exact is a keyword?
Exact is a keyword. Yeah. It's kind of like, I would say it's like a property value. You know, like in a form, you could have required as just a key, like a value that is required is never set to true or false. If you include required, then the person can't submit the form unless it's been filled out because it becomes required, right? Just as much as like path is an attribute, right? And it's being set to this. Exact is an attribute, and it brings with it the additional functionality to evaluate this path. It's configured to evaluate the path and only render that exact path. Okay. Cool. And then we would have the roster too, right? So I'll just go ahead and finish up and get the roster. So I'll create a file. I'll call this roster.js. Once again, I'm just going to copy for the sake of simplicity, just copy into roster, and I'll just make Command D, will highlight both of them, and then I can just do that, roster, right? And I'll just say roster page, so we know we're on the roster page. Go back to app, and I'll add another route, okay? Oh, before I do that, I should import it, right? Import roster. We're going to get rid of all those errors. All right, boom, oh. Boom, roster. Then here, I can say roster will be rendered by roster. Okay, should all work. Boom. Roster, is this not, go back here. Home, schedule, roster page. Yeah, so it's all working. Do you see also how the page is kind of like refreshing too? You see that? That's annoying, right? Aren't we trying to avoid that? Isn't our goal to like avoid doing that? Every time I click on this anchor tag, it refreshes the whole page. It takes me where I want to go to, but it refreshes the page. Now, if I go back to the demo here, look, the page doesn't refresh, right? So that tells me we're missing something, that we're missing one more thing that would help resolve all of that, okay? That one thing that we're missing is the link component. So far, we've had, so if I just put some notes up here, right? We have the router component, the route component, and I'm going to introduce the link component, okay? And the link, what it's going to do is it's going to take the place of these anchor tags, okay? Those anchor tags have been great up to this point, but they act in a way that we don't want it to act like, okay? And so link is going to stop the page from refreshing and just render the content, okay? And that's kind of what we're trying to achieve here. So in order to do that, I'm going to replace the anchor tags. So here I have an anchor tag. I'll do it with one first, and I'll say, I'll select that. I'd select this anchor, and that one, and I'll say link. Okay, so I added a link. Now it's breaking because link is not defined. Who knows what I got to do? Where'd that error come from again? We got to point up? We got to go up, right? We got to go up here and import link, right? If you're going to reference any one of the React router components, then you need to import them here, okay? So I'm going to go back. Now I have this. Now href isn't what we want. We're not going to call it href. We're going to call it 2, okay? So the 2 changes that we make is to take it from this here, right, to something where, well, let's make sure that this works. Let me see. I'm going to go to roster. I'm going to go to home. Look how when I go from roster, I'll go on the full page. Look when I go from roster, which refreshes. Home, it does not refresh now. See that? Schedule refreshes, roster refreshes, home does not refresh at all. And that's because React Router using link kind of prevents the anchor tag from acting like the anchor tag. But if I was to investigate these elements, they are anchor tags. Look, you saw on the React side, I turned that one, at least that one, into a link tag. But once it's converted into HTML, it's an anchor tag, but React is treating it just a little bit differently. It's telling it not to refresh the page. Okay? So if I go back here, I'm going to change this anchor to a link, get rid of the href and change that to B2. I'm going to go to this one, change that to be link, get rid of the href, change that to B2. Did I misspell something here? Oh, no, here. See this? Okay. I made those subtle little changes. And now, you know what I'm going to do too? I almost feel like they don't need to be on separate lines. I feel like I'm wasting a lot of space here by putting these all on separate lines. I feel like that just looks more concise. So that is what I'm going to do. Okay. All right. And now all the pages, home, roster, and schedule, do not update at all, right? Don't refresh the page at all. They do update the content, but they don't refresh the page. And what they're doing is they're rendering content, right? They're rendering a component. That's what they're doing. The component keyword inside of this route says when this route is hit, render this component. Okay? So we can have a section that can render multiple components depending on the route. It's like one big kind of if statement. If the path is this, show this. If it's this, show that. Okay? Kind of like in the homework where we were doing detail, and detail was going to be set to two things, either this HTML or this HTML, but that space on the page was going to be filled by either this or that. This is how we're doing that. We're doing it by setting it as a route and then using link to do that linking between. And so we're allowing React Router to take full control over everything. Cool? All right. Why don't we do this? It's 9:13. Why don't we take our 10-minute break? Then we come back. We'll finish this up, and then we'll jump into a lab. Okay? All right, 9:14, 9:24. We'll come back at 9:24. 9:24. All right, so break time. Back at 9:24. Sweet. Okay. I'm just going to stop sharing, and I'll reshare when I come back. Okay. All right, so we are back. Okay, so what I've done, move this down a little. I've made just a few changes. I've restructured it just a little bit to match this design, right? So we had put everything in app as just freestanding HTML, and that's not what this design is, right? This architecture clearly has header and main as their own components. So I've gone ahead and here done just that. Main and header are now their own components. And so I took the logic that we had here, and I'll start with header because header is the nav, and I just moved the whole nav into header. Doing so, I needed to also import link because that's where link is being rendered. In main, I needed to import route because we're creating our routes, and I needed to import the 3 components that were originally being imported in app are now being imported here in schedule. I think the only one I don't have here, yeah, so main is doing home, schedule, and roster, right? It is rendering these 3, and we do have home, schedule, and roster as our routes for right now. We have one more route we need to create, but that's the basic structure right here, right? Let me go back. Okay, so we're emulating this design. So we have a focus, we know where things are, we know where to find them, and that's what I just did here. Okay, everything still works, okay? Everything still works, okay? Say the rack router, okay. Boom, boom, boom. Just want to see something. When I imported the libraries, we only needed React Router DOM. We didn't need React Router. That was my mistake. My brain was thinking like, you know how React and then React DOM? I was like, oh, we need to do that too, and I forgot. We just need React Router DOM. That's the only thing we need to import. Okay? We're feeling good? Because it's your go time now. Yeah, I know, right? All right. So let me go here. Here is the lab for iStocks. You have the demo for iStocks. It's right here. Oh, it's because of the stocks. This is what you're looking for, stocks and about, and this little icon here, right? You don't have to worry about outputting any of this right now. Just say I'm hitting stocks is fine. We didn't pass anything. We're not passing any data. Here's the starter code. Okay. Here is the starter code. That's the starter code. And the last thing is the architecture, which is why I refactored mine, because I want you to build yours almost identical to mine. So this is one of those, I don't know, if I kind of take a look at what Joe did, I could probably redo the whole thing, okay? So we have this. Now, you only have app, right? And app has its own nav. Oh, no permission for the Google Doc? Let me share it. Okay, sweet. I'm gonna click on it again. Let me know if you can access it. Yeah, I'm seeing it. All good now. Sweet. So it's pretty much the same design. I'm only changing it up because in the end, our routes and our dash and these components will be different, but we're kind of going along with the same structure. So what I want you to do for this lab is refactor this iStocks so that you import the React Router DOM, right? So if I was to say like, instructions here, right? Instructions. You would need to, import React router DOM, right? What would be the next step? If we were importing the React router, what do you think the next step would be? Anybody? Let's do this. I'm going to go live. Connect it to live. All right. So here we go. I'm just reslacking the sandbox out because now you can all edit this file. You should be able to edit the file. Megan, can you edit the file? Just confirm you can edit the file that I just slacked out. You can? Can you do it? You can. All right. So you're up. Lucky contestant. Number one. What's the next step? We import React Router DOM. What would be the next thing that we need to do for our app? And you can type it out. You should be able to type in here too.
I'm not seeing React Router DOM as a dependency. Should I be doing that as well?
Oh, so we are going to do that. I'm walking through just the instructions. Like what React Router DOM, we need to import it. Okay. So you need to install. So I would say install the React Router DOM dependency, right? So let's do that. Dependency. All right. What's the next step? I'll give you one more shot, Megan, and we'll jump to admin.
Imported browser router as a router.
Oh,
Okay.
sorry. I tried to type it and it didn't work. Apparently.
Oh, so can
it doesn't look like that we're able to type in there.
no, you can't. It
I
says
can
I've
type
done,
it, just doesn't save it.
Oh, that we've done this before, right? I'm going to try going live one more time. Connected to live.
Did you
I don't think you
share
shared the live
link?
link.
What's
You
that?
shared a live link.
Oh, I didn't share the live one. Is this not the live one though, right?
Right above stop session, there's
Oh, right here. There we go. Sorry. All right. Do that one more
Okay,
time.
I need another shot though, because I think I have
All
it.
right. You get you going back in the title. Go ahead. What's the next thing? There we go. Now I see everyone jumping on. Whoa, everyone's jumping on. Okay. What do we got? Got it. And where are we going to do that import? In which component? In index. Sweet. Okay, Abner, what's the next step? We import browser router. What's our next step? Correct. We wrap the router. Awesome. What's our next step, Ramona? What would our next step be? We're going to wrap the app in router. And what's our next step? Okay. And wrap. Okay. Could do that too, right? Outside of maybe the creating and the nesting of things, one of the other important things that we would need to do at this point in time is define our routes, right? I mean, the whole restructuring of creating the individual header and the main components from the design, we know that that needs to be done, but we also need to know, like, I'm gonna refactor this just to say create a main and header component, right? And move content, right? Or add content or whatnot, right? And then what's the next step? Now that we say we did that, inside of main, what do we need to do? Demola, what do we need to do inside of main? We have two more React Router DOM components that we need to import and work with. What are those two? You can phone a friend, Demola. You can be like, Rafat your shot.
I was trying to write in it. Hold on. It was taking me.
Okay. I can write it if you want. I'll write it. You just tell me what to write.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. I'll do that then.
Tell me. We created the main and the header component, and we moved our content, and so we just have our content split up.
Create the routing tags.
Yeah, create the route, right? So I'm going to say import the route component and add routes, right? Okay. What would be the last and final step here? What would we need to do in the header? And this is all going to be in main, right? Import the routes component. Okay. Import the route component and add routes in main, because that's where we're going to be doing it. And what's the last one? What's the last React router component we need to work with? Who wants to do it? Ramona, you want? I feel like you're typing away. I'll take it. Take anyone who wants to do it. Add. Oh, there we go. I think you're on the right track. Add, replace anchors with link, right? Awesome. Sweet. And we have to do that inside header, right? And we do that inside of the header component because that's where our links are. I'm just trying to break it down as normal HTML would be, right? Sweet. Cool. And so you need to import that first. Like I would import it first and then do the replacement. Otherwise, you see the errors. So I would say I would just cut this and put it above this one so that we know to import the link component in header and replace anchor tags with link, right? Those look like solid instructions. I think based on this, you could be able to do this lab. Think so? I think so. All right. So let's do the lab. I'm going to say, so we got 9:37. And let's do, okay, I'm not going to do breakout rooms. I'm just going to leave. We'll stay in this room. If anybody has a question, I'll jump in and try to help. Maybe it'll pertain to everyone else. Try to work on it. I think from what I built, should be pretty straightforward. Okay. I'm going to say it's 9:37. Say about 15 minutes. I don't think it's going to take you 15 minutes, but let's just say click on thumbs up when done. All right. So I'm going to put thumbs up. And we'll give about 15 minutes to get this done. If you're done beforehand, awesome, we'll review. All right, and we're on. You know what to do. I'll resume the recording. Just in case I need to solve an issue or something, we can record that. $15 minutes, 9:37, 40. Okay. Set the timer. Let's say we're at 14 minutes. Okay. Set the timer. We'll go back. Here's iStocks. All right. I'm just going to step away for a minute just to fill my water bottle. Abdul's here. You can always ask a question. I'm going to be back in like 1 minute. So bring everyone back. Let's take a look at the solution here based on our instructions, right? So the first thing would have been to import React Router DOM. Let me see, is this is it, right? Okay. Import React Router DOM, right? We import React Router DOM, we can start working with it. The second thing would be to go to index and import browser router as router from React Router DOM now that it's been installed, and then just wrap the app around it. Okay. We would then in app, we could create or just kind of emulate what we did, a header and a main. And I'm taking that off of this, right? That's the design that we're working with. So I know I need two components, a main and a header. So I could just go ahead and create those. And there was already header information on the page. That's why we saw the nav, and we know that that's going to go into header. So it's easy enough just to say, all right, I can create a header component and move over all of the HTML for the header and just put it in there, right? Once you create it, I'm importing the link here, but that was further on, right? It was like create the structure and then do the thing. But since we're here, I import link and update all my anchor tags to be links and get rid of hrefs and change them to reference the to keyword, right? And then if I go back to app, I would import header, and then I would have had just a header. And everything would have kind of worked, right? I mean, we'd click on stuff. We may not have seen anything because we didn't have routes. So in main, right, once again, I'm just following my design. In main, I would create a main element here and then output home, about, and dashboard. And the paths are / about and stocks. And once again, it's just this design. The / the about, and stocks are the things that we're trying to render. We haven't gotten to the switch yet. We're gonna get to that. But these would be the three that we're rendering. I didn't render the stock ID, and you saw that I haven't done that yet. That's something later on when we deal with params. And then I just created these corresponding components, right? These corresponding components to match up to that. So here, I have dashboard, about, and what's the other one? Home. Okay, so in main, I import those three components. I import route, and then I create my routes. And I added the exact keyword here. Once again, without the exact keyword, going to any of these, let's see, would include home. Right? Stocks, seems like stocks is going, maybe I don't have anything in there, but so we want to include that exact keyword. Okay, so we don't see the additional routes. So we have about, and these components would get rendered in these routes. All right. That was really, you know, what we had done. Go back to here, the roster page, almost identical, right? And if I compare the roster here, right, all of this, we did header, main, app, we wrapped it around. I had this route, schedule, roster, and I created these components. So I was trying to align it kind of exactly with what you saw so that you couldn't get lost, I suppose, right? Cool. What kind of questions do we have? Do we have any questions? There's got to be questions.
Can you use regular expressions in the router?
You can use regular expressions. Yep.
How do you create a list of links which is larger than 3? Like, what do you get up to? 20, 50, 60?
Oh, I could just Oh, you mean path, routes, or links?
Yeah, is there a more efficient way than just having to put out the route every time?
So we could figure out some sort of mapping and map over something, right? So if I mapped over a series of routes, if I had an object that contained a path, right? So if I had an array of objects and the array of objects had a path that told me where I should go and then a component on what I should execute, right? Then I could loop over that and render out individual routes and then just return that. So you could structure this as an object with those key value pairs, and then it would just be a matter of, we don't necessarily need the exact keyword. There is a way for us to not use it by including the switch keyword, and we haven't gotten to that yet, but switch would allow us to reorder our routes from most specific to least specific, and we don't need the exact keyword. So theoretically, if your routes are created in the order of specificity, most specific to least specific, you could loop over them and create them all, right? And then I suppose, how many routes would you need here? Because we can also nest routes inside these other components. Any one of these components can actually have their own routes inside of them also. So you can break off this routing structure so it's not this one huge monstrosity. But anything that would be stocks / something, I can actually create a sub-route within stocks here, within the dashboard component, that would listen to not only stocks, but would listen to stocks / ID if we wanted to do that. We haven't gotten to that. But yeah, there's definitely efficient ways of doing it. Anyone else? Questions? Sweet. Okay. There is routing in itself could be, a 2 full day thing. When I teach routing on site during the day, it's, like 2 days of working through routes and hands-on labs and everything. So, we're condensing as much as I can into just the 2 days. This week is just routing. So we're going to pick up routes where we left off and continue it to do nested routes. That's our ultimate goal, is to nest the routes, as well as what I'd like to do is, instead of using some stock data, see here, I have an array of data. Ultimately, that's what we're going to be looping over and creating. I want to use an API. So I have an API where we can go make a fetch call and component and mount and update and continue the process of doing what we've already learned and continue to work with that. Because if we stop making fetch calls, a couple of classes, you'll be like, where do I do it? How do I do it? I want you to be ready for your, start thinking about your final project. Okay. And the more you work with it, the more you'll be in tune with what you need to incorporate. Okay. Awesome. Awesome as usual. And exit tickets, please. I know you filled out a form, but I'd love to hear how you think React Router went. And reach out with questions or anything. And I did add the extra bonus memory game. So if you did finish with the labs ahead of time, you can always work on that as well. Cool. And office hours. Please sign up for office hours. All right, that being said, I'll stop now, and I'll post a recording either tonight or first thing tomorrow. Okay? All right.
Thank you.
All right. Have a good night, everyone.
Thanks.
All right. Good night.
Good night.